Kyle Busch reveals that he injured himself before the start of the 2026 NASCAR season, and Alex Bowman is confirmed to not be racing this weekend at Las Vegas Motor Speedway, and Chastain and Logano will substitute. What's going on, guys? It's Daniel, and welcome back to our video. We got some NASCAR number of sports stories discussed here today on the channel. Let's go ahead and just some those really quickly. First, going to take a look at a ton of paint schemes that have been revealed over the course of the last couple days. Let's go ahead and just jump straight into them. The first paint scheme we're taking a look at is Cole Custer's 2026 Cisco scheme that we'll see in the O'Reilly Auto Parts Series race at Las Vegas. Scheme looks alright in my opinion. Really good to see Cole Custer back in the O'Reilly Auto Parts Series for the first time in quite some time. Scheme looks alright. Looking forward to the racetrack at Las Vegas. The next paint scheme we're taking a look at is Cody Wurst's 2026 Yigo scheme that we'll see this weekend at Las Vegas. Like the look of the Yigo car. I think there's some good things about the car, to be honest. It's interesting simplicity, but I do think it's alright. The next paint scheme we're taking a look at is Chris Buescher's 2026 Farmbridge scheme that we'll see this weekend at Las Vegas Motor Speedway. I like the look of this car, to be honest. I think sometimes RFK's paint schemes, especially these kind of ones, don't always work too well, but I think this one actually works solidly. I think there's some good colors on it. Looking forward to the racetrack this weekend at Las Vegas. The next paint scheme we're taking a look at is Timmy Hill's 2026 unit scheme that we'll see then a couple weeks from now, I believe, at Darlington Raceway. Truck looks alright in my opinion. Kind of looks like a summer units car we've seen in the past for Timmy Hill and the Hill Motorsports team. I think there's some good things about it, and the truck looks pretty good. The next paint scheme we're taking a look at is Ryan Ellis's 2026 Tableau TV scheme that we'll see this weekend at Las Vegas Motor Speedway. I really like the look of this car. I love the Sin City look that it's got in it. I think the colors look fantastic, and I think that the Young's Motorsports team knocked it out of the park. The next paint scheme we're taking a look at is Carson Ospar's 2026 Chili scheme that we'll see this weekend at Las Vegas Motor Speedway. This is a traditional Chili's car, not the black Dente car that they had earlier in the year. I love the look of this car alive. The Chili's car from last year looked great. I think there's some great colors on it for sure. Looking forward to the racetrack this weekend at Las Vegas. The next paint scheme we're taking a look at is Shaman Gisbergen's 2026 Superfile scheme that we'll see this weekend at Las Vegas Motor Speedway. This in collaboration with Mr. Brainwash. I absolutely love the look of this car. It looks fantastic. Yes, it's kind of busy in a sense, but I love the fact they've got something similar to this like this. I think the colors look really, really good, and the colors look fantastic. It's an awesome looking car for Shaman Gisbergen. The next paint scheme we're taking a look at is Denny Hamlin's 2026 Yahoo scheme that we'll see this week in a couple of the races throughout the 2026 season. I think the Yahoo car actually looks really good. I love the simplistic purple scheme we've seen. And of course, Denny Hamlin's had the purple, which of course he won with a purple scheme for last year at Vegas. I think it's a good looking car. We're looking forward to the racetrack this weekend at Las Vegas. The next paint scheme we're taking a look at is Jeb Burton's 2026 Bomberito scheme that we'll see this weekend at Las Vegas Motor Speedway. Car looks pretty good in my opinion. I love the look of the Bomberito car. This one looks really awesome. I think Jordan Anderson Racing did a pretty good job on this one. The next paint scheme we're taking a look at is AJ Allmendinger's and Ty Dillon's 2026 U-Save schemes that we'll see this weekend at Las Vegas Motor Speedway. I like the fact that they're differentiating in both of the cars. I think it's going to make a lot of sense to differentiate them and make them look a little different so you kind of know, and the spotters are going to know what the cars look like. I think it looks pretty good. Looking forward to the racetrack this weekend at Las Vegas. And the final paint scheme we're taking a look at is Blaine Perkins' 2026 City Light scheme that we'll see this weekend at Las Vegas Motor Speedway. Car looks pretty good in my opinion. I think that the Jordan Anderson race team knocked this one out of the park. Colors look pretty solid. Do like the colors overall quite a bit for sure. Looking forward to the racetrack this weekend at Las Vegas Motor Speedway. And now we're going to head on to the next story of today's episode as we're talking about the National Rally Auto Parts Series race as they have a title sponsor for the event. The title sponsor is going to be called the Sports Illustrated Resorts 250. This is the first time Sports Illustrated maybe has ever sponsored a NASCAR race or the first time they sponsored in a very, very long time. It's definitely a big sponsorship. Their magazines are really, really huge. And I think it's pretty awesome. And I think it's really cool to see that they'll be the sponsor for the National Rally Auto Parts Series race. A big deal for that event. Obviously, Cracker Barrel sponsor the Cup Series race again in Nashville. Pretty good to see that Sports Illustrated is going to be sponsoring the O'Reilly Auto Parts Series race at Nashville Super Speedway. And now we're going to head on to the next story of today's episode as we're talking about NOS Energy. as it was announced yesterday that NOS Energy will continue sponsoring Ricky Stenhouse Jr. in 2026. And according to the deal, it is a multi-race deal for 2026. They'll sponsor for at least 4 NASCAR Cup Series events, including this weekend at Las Vegas Motor Speedway, I believe North Wilkesboro later in the year, and also believe at Iowa Speedway later in the season as well. NOS Energy's had a partnership with Ricky Stenhouse Jr. for many, many years. They've been working with Ricky since he, of course, drove for the organization known as RFK for many years. I think it's great to see they're back once again working with the team in 2026. I think the colors on the car also look very solid, and once again, I think it's great and really good to see that NOS Energy once again will be working with the team and working with the program in 2026. Really awesome stuff. And now we're going to jump on to the next story of today's episode as we're talking about Tiffany Stratton. As it was announced on Monday afternoon that Tiffany Stratton will be the pace car driver for the NASCAR Cup Series race at Las Vegas Motor Speedway. Many of you are going to recognize Tiffany Stratton. She, of course, is big in the WWE, and of course, a lot of people correlate NASCAR with the WWE. Tiffany Stratton is very, very popular among a lot of wrestling fans, and I think that I don't think she's ever had anything officially of NASCAR before, I'm pretty sure. So this is a really good opportunity for her to be part of the sport in some way, shape, or form. Interested to see how she'll do behind the wheel. Maybe, who knows, she'll get to do the Richard Petty experience at some point. Who knows at this point? Nonetheless, great opportunity for her, and good to see she'll get the chance to be the pace car driver for the NASCAR Cup Series race at Las Vegas. And now we're going to jump on to the next story of today's episode as we're talking about the Las Vegas purse money for this weekend. So every time we have a NASCAR Cup, an O'Reilly, and NASCAR Craftsman Truck Series race, Bob Pockets puts out the purse money for the event. And according to Bob, for the NASCAR Cup race, it's $11,233,037. And for the O'Reilly Auto Parts Series race, it's $1,653,590. This is pretty consistent with what the purse money has been really to start the year. The Cup Series pretty much the same. The only time it really changes is if we have extra open cars that show up. And for the O'Reilly Auto Parts Series, it's pretty much been the same. I've been saying this for a while. I think the O'Reilly Auto Parts Series, they need to increase the purse money because I think there needs to be more money going in for that. Same with the Truck Series. Seems like it's really consistent. I think that's more of a thing with the TV deal than anything else at this point. But I'm glad to see the purse money's been officially revealed, and I'm glad to see we have the purse money for the week at Vegas because we always get it every week, and we now know what the purse money for sure will be this weekend at Las Vegas Motor Speedway. And now we're going to jump on to the next story of today's episode as we're talking about Tyler Reddick and Bubba Wallace. As it was reported by the NASCAR Insights account on Monday afternoon going into evening that Tyler Reddick and Bubba Wallace are the only 2 NASCAR Cup Series drivers with top 15s in all 4 NASCAR Cup Series events in 2026. Tyler Reddick had 3 first-place finishes, and then he had an 8th-place finish at Phoenix, while Bubba Wallace has had finishes of 10th in the Daytona 500, finishing in 8th at Atlanta Motor Speedway, finishing in 11th position at Coda, and then finishing at 6th at Phoenix International Raceway. I would not be surprised or shocked if these guys continue having top 15s for a lot of races because they're both really good at Vegas, they're both really good at Darlington, and they've both had decent numbers at Bristol as well. We'll see if that continues into the future. Nonetheless, I think it's good for Reddick and Bubba. I think they both had really solid starts of the year, and both have put together some really strong runs to start the 2026 NASCAR Cup Series season with 2311 Racing, which is why they're first and third in the standings. And now we're going to jump on to the next story of today's episode as we're talking about Kurt Busch and Harry Gant. As it was announced on Monday afternoon that Kurt Busch and Harry Gant are the Grand Marshals for the 2026 Goodyear 400. The reason they're both being the Grand Marshals every single year for the last couple years, the people that have been inducted in the NASCAR Hall of Fame for the modern era ballot have been the people to give the command. We saw that last year with Ricky Rudd and Carl Edwards, and because Kurt Busch and Harry Gant were inducted in the NASCAR Hall of Fame for 2026, they both will be the people for the Grand Marshal. I think both are going to do a really good job. Generally, when Kurt Busch does it, there's a ton of excitement, and I think Kurt is going to provide a lot of excitement when it comes to giving the command for that event. So I'm excited to see that for Kurt. I think it's a great opportunity for him to give the command for the NASCAR Cup Series race at Goodyear race at Darlington. Also good for Harry Gant to also get the chance and opportunity. Someone who's criminally underrated and someone who did a lot of great things in a NASCAR Hall of Famer. Congrats to him on getting the chance and opportunity to give the command for the NASCAR Cup Series race at Darlington next weekend. And now we're going to jump on to the next story of today's episode as we're talking about Jonathan Davis. As it was announced earlier yesterday that Jonathan Davis will give the command for the NASCAR Cup Series race at Las Vegas Motor Speedway for the Pennzoil 400. Jonathan Davis, a legend. He, of course, is the lead front singer of Korg, one of the most iconic rock voices of the 1990s and the 2000s. Known for some of the craziest vocal things you'll see every single time he's there. But he's a fantastic singer in a sense, and I think he's going to bring a lot of energy. What I'm really hoping for Jonathan Davis is when he gives the command for the NASCAR Cup Series race at Vegas, I hope he opens up by saying, "Are you ready?" With one of the most iconic songs, Blind. If you know the song, he just says, "Are you ready?" in the song, and I would love to see him get the chance and opportunity to give the command like that. We'll see if that happens, but also to see Jonathan Davis get the chance and opportunity to give the command for the NASCAR Cup Series race at Las Vegas. A really solid, great opportunity for him to get the chance and opportunity to give the command for that event. And now we're going to jump on to the next story of today's episode as we're talking about Timmy Hill. As it was announced yesterday that Timmy Hill will drive the number 66 for Garage 66 next weekend in the NASCAR Cup Series race at Darlington Raceway. I believe, if I'm not mistaken, this is going to be the first time that Timmy Hill has competed in the NASCAR Cup Series in 2026. Obviously, Timmy Hill is focused on pretty much racing full-time in the NASCAR Craftsman Truck Series with his team and program, and now is getting a chance and opportunity to drive for the Garage 66 team. Timmy, in my opinion, a very underrated driver. Reminder, last year in the Truck Series race at Darlington in the fall event, he was really strong and really fast in that race and put together a really strong run and had a really good chance and opportunity to go out there and get even top 5 or top 10. He ran top 10 a lot of that race, and that truck showed good pace and speed. While I don't expect the same thing, I could see him doing a lot in this equipment and maybe getting one of the better runs we've seen from Garage 66, because generally they're one of the slowest teams out there. They had trouble in Daytona qualifying with Casey Mears, and they've had issues with other drivers getting up to speed of it. We saw Parker Retzlaff do not too bad at Richmond about a year or so ago. Nonetheless, I think it's an amazing opportunity. I do expect that Timmy Hill is going to be pretty fast and really, really competitive in next week's event at Darlington. I think he's going to put together a strong performance. I think he could be good in the Truck Series race and certainly could be really good in the NASCAR Cup Series race at Darlington. Looking forward to see what he can do next week at Darlington Raceway. And now we're going to jump on to the next story of today's episode as we're talking about Christopher Tate, as he announced on Monday that he will make his NASCAR Truck Series debut later this year at San Diego at Naval Base Coronado. Many of you are not going to recognize the name Christopher Tate. Christopher Tate, at one point, I believe, was a development driver for 3F Racing at one point when that organization was around and rumored to be making some starts in the NASCAR Cup Series. Christopher Tate also is a U.S. Marine, and I think he basically has been serving in the Marines for the last couple of years. So he's going to be one of the first Marines that has ever competed in a NASCAR Truck Series event. Not the first one, but one of the first ones to ever do it. I really hope Christopher can do well. He's made some starts in the ARCA Menard Series for some of the smaller organizations in the past. And I think for Christopher, this is an amazing and a great opportunity. Once again, congratulations, Christopher, on being able to get the opportunity to make your NASCAR Truck Series debut. He can't, of course, I don't know if he's eligible to run the O'Reilly Auto Parts Series race or Cup races. Not sure if he's been approved about that at this point. Nonetheless, I think it's great to see and fantastic to see that Christopher Tate will get the chance and opportunity. I hope he does a really solid job and really good job in his Truck Series debut later this year in the Truck Series race at San Diego. And now we're going to jump on to the next story of today's episode as we're talking about Max Verstappen. As it was announced on Monday morning that Max Verstappen will officially compete in the 2026 24 Hours of Nürburgring. The first time Max will be competing in the 24 Hours of Nürburgring. His teammates are going to be Lucas Auer and a couple other big notable drivers in the IMSA paddock as well. This is something we've been waiting for a very long time. Max Verstappen has driven at Nürburgring quite a bit in the last couple years or so. Really did some stuff and kind of had an alias running when F1 was during their off time. But the 24 Hours of Nürburgring is not that far away from happening. And for this to be announced just a week after the opener of Formula 1 is certainly interesting. You think about some of the rumors and the rumblings, because he's going to be driving a Mercedes, which is really interesting, because from what I understand, Max Verstappen has a contract with Red Bull for 2028. But from what I saw in the car, it looks like Red Bull is going to be on the car that he is going to run. I think Max Verstappen, though, he will be very fun to watch. When he ran some of the GT stuff last year at the Nürburgring track, he was really fast and really, really competitive. And I think Max could certainly be a sleeper for a really strong and really good run in the 24 Hours of Nürburgring. When we think of Max Verstappen, he's a fantastic wheelman who can get the best out of his equipment every time he goes out to the racetrack. And I think Max will be able to do that this time around. So I'm really happy for Max to get the opportunity to finally run the 24 Hours of Nürburgring. This has been one of the races that has been on Max Verstappen's bucket list to run. And now, like I mentioned before, he's getting that chance and opportunity to be part of it. It's going to be a huge opportunity. If, let's just say, he goes out there, wins, that'll be a really, really huge win. I don't know if he's going to win in the class he's going to be, because I think the GTP class, or whatever the top level class, it's probably going to be tough to win, but he could win the GT class. I think he's got a solid chance at it, and certainly a pretty good opportunity to be competitive. Looking forward to see what it can do. We'll see if he can be really strong, really, really competitive in the Nürburgring 24 Hours. Excited to see what he can do in the race and in the event as well. And now we're going to head on to the next story of today's episode, as we're talking about Maya Snyder. As it was announced on Monday going into Tuesday that Maya Snyder will make his first official NASCAR start in 2026, as he'll drive the number 30 car for Brisco Racing this weekend at Las Vegas Motor Speedway. Now, it is worth noting that Maya Snyder did actually get on the racetrack earlier this year, Circuit Americas, when he substituted for Alex Bowman when he got out of the car early. But that did not count toward an official start. So this start at Las Vegas Motor Speedway for Maya Snyder is going to be the first official start that Maya Snyder has had in 2026. This is a really solid opportunity. I think that opportunity he had with Hendrick Motorsports at COTA really gave him a chance and opportunity to drive for a team like Brisco Racing. I think Maya Snyder is a very underrated race car driver. I know he's not had the greatest statistics. Yes, he does have a win in the O'Reilly Auto Parts Series, which he did get that win at Homestead Miami Speedway back in 2021 when Noah Gragson ended up crashing into the back of a couple other drivers like David Starr, I'm pretty sure. But for Maya Snyder, like I said before, this is an amazing opportunity for Maya to be back in the O'Reilly Auto Parts Series. Last year, he drove for DGM Racing, has some decent runs with that team and program, and I would imagine he's going to do a pretty solid job behind the wheel of the car this week, and I think he'll be one of the better drivers in that organization, and I think he'll do a decent chance, and I think he'll put together a pretty solid and a pretty good performance behind the wheel, as I think he'll finish likely in the top 30. Good luck to Maya Snyder, a great opportunity, and glad to see he's getting the chance and opportunity to drive the number 30 car this weekend at Las Vegas Motor Speedway. And now we're going to head on to the next story of today's episode, as we're talking about the IndyCar Phoenix race ratings from this past weekend at Phoenix International Raceway. As it was reported by Adam Stern yesterday that Fox got 1.247 million viewers for Saturday's IndyCar race on Fox at Phoenix Raceway. That, while the numbers and the percentage numbers didn't come in, because this was the first time we've seen a race at Phoenix and IndyCar in a very, very long time, the numbers were up, I believe, exponentially from the second event last year, which I believe only had maybe like 375 or like maybe 700,000 viewers for the race at Thermal Club. So that is a major, major increase. And I think a lot of that is the NASCAR crossover, right? A lot of NASCAR fans did tune into the IndyCar race at Phoenix Raceway, but also being on a bigger network and a bigger network than NBC, and also Fox doing a lot more promotion for this event and NASCAR up on the promotion side of things. I think that's really helped IndyCar, and they're off to the best start they've had in a very, very long time. With Arlington coming up this weekend, I think that they're in a really solid position going forward, especially for IndyCar, and I think IndyCar could have the biggest ratings year they've had in a very long time. Last year, the ratings were really, really good, but I think they could be in for even a bigger year in the ratings department in 2026. So like I've already said, this is a pretty solid number for the IndyCar race especially. I think it's a big win for the sport to see the ratings up for IndyCar once again. I think it's good to see almost 1.3 million people, 1.25 million tune in. I think that's a huge number for the event, and pretty good to see that the Phoenix ratings are out. I think it's a big win for the sport. Good to see the ratings are officially out, and I think it's a pretty solid number for the IndyCar event, in my honest opinion. And now we're going to head on to the next story of today's episode, as we are talking about the Freedom 250 for IndyCar, as it was announced on Monday afternoon that the Freedom 250 layout has been officially revealed. Reminder, the Freedom 250 is an extra IndyCar race in 2026 that will take place in the streets of Washington. And looking at the new layout for the IndyCar Freedom 250, which of course is endorsed by President Donald Trump, the course has been revealed, and it's a very, very short course. It is only 1.66 miles. This is going to be one of the shortest, if maybe not the shortest road course we currently have on the IndyCar schedule. It kind of looks very symmetrical in some areas, and there's definitely some interesting things. There's not a lot of major passing zones that I could see at the racetrack. Now, with it being a very short track, it's expected to be a lot of laps. I think Bob Pockrass also reported as well that it's expected to be around 150 laps laps for the event. So while it is, because they're expecting lap times to be around 50 to 55 seconds in the max, and they could go definitely faster in qualifying, so we could see laps under 50 seconds in the race next year. I think it's certainly interesting. I'm not sure how the racing is going to be. Again, Doug Bowles still does expect that this event is going to go down without a hitch, which I really hope there aren't issues with this race, because much as it is somewhat of controversial for some people, I still think it could be a really, really huge deal. Plus, it's a race on the East Coast, which I think is a win. Nonetheless, I think the layout, there's some interesting qualities to it. Hopefully the racing's good. Hopefully there's no issues getting the event in, because there's been some controversy around this event. I hope there is a successful event, and I really do think it could be successful. We'll see how the racing goes, and hopefully the racing can be good with the Freedom 250 later this year in the streets of Washington. And now we're going to head on to the next story of today's episode, as we're talking about Chase Briscoe. As Brent Cruz put out a tweet late Sunday evening that Chase Briscoe will drive the number 19 car for Joe Gibbs Racing this weekend at Las Vegas Motor Speedway. Wix Filters, which has signed a partnership with Joe Gibbs Racing, will also be on the car for Chase Briscoe this weekend. The reason that Chase Briscoe is behind the wheel of the number 19 car and not Brent Cruz is because Brent Cruz is not 18 years old for about a couple more weeks. He will turn, I believe, 18 around March 29th to March 30th. And drivers under the age of 18 years old can compete at tracks that are 1.25 miles or shorter, but cannot compete at tracks bigger than that. That's why Brent Cruz cannot race this weekend at Las Vegas Motor Speedway, nor can he race next weekend at Darlington Race, because Darlington also is way too big for Brent Cruz to get behind the wheel. But he's got a good replacement behind the wheel, that being Chase Briscoe. Chase Briscoe is really, really good at Las Vegas Motor Speedway in the O'Reilly Auto Parts Series. Chase Briscoe actually won the O'Reilly Auto Parts Series race at Las Vegas Motor Speedway in 2020 when he drove the number 98 for Stewart-Haas Racing. And I would expect Chase Briscoe to be a big factor in this car as well. Reminder, the 19 car, which last year was driven by Eric Almirola, went eventually beating the likes of Jesse Love and Connor Zilisch in the race. I think Chase Briscoe's got a good chance and opportunity. While his cup numbers have not been amazing at this track with a 21st place average finish, I'm pretty sure Chase Briscoe has shown some good numbers in the O'Reilly Auto Parts Series. So I do expect that Chase Briscoe is probably going to be somewhat of a factor and contender in this race. I think he's going to put together a really strong opportunity to compete. He's got a great opportunity here with JGR. Good to see him getting behind the wheel of this car. I think he'll be somewhat of a factor and contender, the number 19, and we'll see what he can do. Not sure he'll be in the car next weekend at Darlington. That still has not been announced at this point. Wait to see when that does get announced, and we'll wait to see when that does end up getting officially being confirmed next week at Darlington. And now we're going to head on to the next story of today's episode, as we're talking about Mike Christopher Jr. As Mike Christopher Jr. announced, and Declan Wayman reported on this as well yesterday, that Mike Christopher Jr. confirmed on Instagram that he will run the NASCAR Truck Series race in a couple weeks from now at Rockingham Speedway. While the team has not been officially announced what team he is going to run, this will be the first time we see Mike Christopher Jr. in the NASCAR Craftsman Truck Series in 2026, and will only be the second time we see Mike Christopher Jr. in the Truck Series. Last year, Mike Christopher Jr., who is a nephew of Ted Christopher, he competed and made his own Truck Series debut at New Hampshire. Actually put together a really solid performance. I think he finished in the top 20 last year and did a pretty solid job behind the wheel of the number 62 for Halmer Friesen Racing. So the question is, what team is Mike Christopher going to run? I would expect he's going to drive the number 62 truck for Halmer Friesen Racing. Why? Well, that would make the most sense at this point. While they haven't announced he's going to drive the 25 truck for the organization of Colic Racing, I do expect there could be a big name in that truck. I wouldn't be surprised if Casey Kane is a driver, considering that Casey Kane has been really, really good at Rockingham in the past. Plus, it looked really good when he drove for RCR not too long ago. I imagine Casey Kane could be the driver behind the wheel in 2 or 3 weeks from now. I think that Mike drives the number 62 truck for Halmer Friesen Racing. That's the one that I'm linking toward him at this point, and that's the one I think he's going to end up driving for later this year at Rockingham. So nonetheless, I'm happy for Mike, because I'm a big fan of Mike Christopher. I think the guy is really talented, and I think he's one of these guys that does deserve a chance and opportunity to get behind the wheel of a race car like this. So excited for Mike. Good chance and opportunity to be in the NASCAR Craftsman Truck Series. I think it'll be pretty competitive, because you have to be pretty talented to get behind the wheel and to run around this racetrack and show competitive speed. So I think he'll do a pretty good job at Rockingham in a couple weeks from now. Excited to see what he can do, and we'll see if Mike can show some really good things in a couple weeks from now in the Truck Series race at Rockingham Speedway. And now we're going to head on to the next story of today's episode, as we're talking about IndyCar. As it was reported by Adam Stern on Monday afternoon that Doug Bowles was speaking to the media a couple days ago. and he reports that IndyCar is open to extending future seasons into the fall if the right event could lead up with a broadcast lead-in for the IndyCar season. This is something really, really big because reminder with Fox and with Fox having a partnership with IndyCar now, and IndyCar, especially now with the Fox NFL side of things, there's a lot of talk that IndyCar wants to get their seasons done a little bit earlier, so they're not messing with the NFL calendar, and they're certainly not getting into the window of the NFL season. That's one of the reasons why the IndyCar season is ending pretty much in late August, going into early September, because that jumps right into there. And with Fox having a part ownership of the IndyCar series now, and being a part owner with Penske Entertainment Group at this point, I do imagine that they probably want to make a big decision. So my question is, what could be something that could open up in the NFL? Well, there are some tracks you could open up. I mean, Michigan will be a little cooler at that point. You certainly could go up to a track like Michigan. Maybe National Super Speedway gets pushed back to the season finale, because to me, I think the right type of racetrack that needs to be the season finale event is an oval. I think a road course, well, yes, road course racing can be good in IndyCar. I do think that it should be an oval closing out the season. I think Nashville closing out the season last year especially was a really, really big deal for the series, and I think it was something that should happen once again. So I really hope that's what they go with. But I think IndyCar needs more races. I'm not saying we need to go up to like 30 races in IndyCar. I think maybe going up to, instead of like having 17 or 18, going up to like, let's say 20 or 21, I think that would be an ideal schedule where you get some more ovals and maybe an extra road course on the schedule going forward. I think we need more race IndyCar schedule. I really hope we do get more IndyCar races in the future, and I really hope that we open up the opportunity for something like this, because I think more races on the schedule is a big win for everybody. I hope we do see this in the near and not so distant future. And now we're going to head on to the next story of today's episode, as we're talking about Corey Heim. As it was announced yesterday, a couple days ago, that Corey Heim will drive the number 5 truck for Tricon Garage next week in the NASCAR Craftsman Truck Series race at Darlington Raceway. This will be the second race that Corey Heim will race in the NASCAR Craftsman Truck Series. Reminder, Corey Heim drove, I believe, the number 1 truck at Atlanta Motor Speedway a couple weeks back, and he was really fast and really competitive in that race. He had one of the strongest trucks in the field. Actually won a stage with that one truck with Jeremy Donnelly as the crew chief, and he did a really good job behind the wheel. Obviously, Corey Heim is also the most recent winner at Darlington Raceway in the NASCAR Craftsman Truck Series. When he drove the 11 truck. We're not sure if Scott Sabadell will be back to be the crew chief, but this week, as he's still recovering from the injury. But when Corey Heim drove the 11 truck, despite the fact that Lane Riggs and Chandler Swift probably did have the stronger trucks in the field, Corey Heim did have a really good truck and ended up picking up the win in victory. And Corey Heim's had a really good history in the past at Darlington Raceway. Well, I'm not putting him down as a favorite at this time, so I believe Kyle Busch may or may not be running that race. I believe Ross Chastain's also competing, and Ross historically been really good at Darlington. I do think Corey Heim is certainly one of the favorites. My question is, who is going to be the crew chief of that number 5 truck? Because we've seen Adam Andretti behind the wheel of the truck, and we've all seen other drivers like Nick Lights get a chance and opportunity, but the 5 trucks had some decent runs to start 2026. My prediction for Corey Heim is he certainly will be a threat and contender. Again, I don't think he's certainly the favorite to go out there and get the win in victory, but I think he's going to put together a pretty good performance in this truck. I expect Corey to be I think Corey is going to have a good chance and opportunity to be somewhat competitive for sure. Looking forward to see what it can do, and looking forward to see what Corey Heim can do next weekend at Darlington Raceway in trucks. It won't be running the Cup Series or O'Reilly Auto Parts Series race at this time, but I do think that Corey Heim probably put together a pretty solid run in the Truck Series with Tricon. Again, very happy to see Corey having a chance to be back in the Truck Series. Looking forward to see what he can do next weekend in the Truck Series race at Darlington Raceway. Looking forward, and I'm glad to see he's got the chance to do it later next week, and I think it'll be pretty competitive. And now we're going to head on to the next story of today's episode, as we're talking about Mike Joy. Now, Mike Joy, about a day or so ago on Twitter, went on Twitter to pretty much make a correction, and something he'll talk about on the Fox broadcast later this week at Las Vegas Motor Speedway. It really was an apology to Alex Bowman. Basically, Mike Joy, I think, it said that something happened. It said that there was apparently something else that was going on with Alex Bowman at the point where Alex Bowman got out of the car at Circuit Americas. But what Mike Joy had said on the Phoenix broadcast during, I believe, the practice and qualifying session and during the race as well multiple times, is he emphasized multiple different times that COTA was not the reason why Alex Bowman was not feeling very, very well, and that the vertigo symptoms had not just shown up at COTA and been something that had been lingering for quite some time. Mike Joy did say he wanted to apologize for that and wanted to make a correction on that. First of all, kudos to Mike Joy for coming out in a tweet a couple days ago, basically a day or so after the race had happened, and basically making a correction on that. I know that Fox had some issues with criticism. We'll get to that in just a minute, but I do think it's good to see someone like Mike Joy can say, hey, we made a mistake. I made a mistake on the broadcast, and I do want to apologize, and I want to clarify the situation there. Obviously, we're going to talk about Alex Bowman later, as we got some unfortunate news earlier today on Alex Bowman, whether he'll be racing in this weekend or not, which we know that he won't be racing this weekend in Las Vegas, unfortunately. But for Mike Joy to do that, kudos to him. Sometimes you see some of the tweets of Mike Joy and he questions sometimes, but this is one of the times I praise Mike Joy quite a bit. And I look at Fox this year, right? Fox this year, they've had some improvements in 2026. There's no denying that. They have shown some improvement, and they have shown some growth, especially with their broadcast, but they still have a lot of fundamental issues, and they do have a lot of fundamental flaws, and I still think there's things that need to be worked on. Like, I know that we're getting away from full-screen commercials, but there's more ads. I obviously know the TV deal plays a role, and there being a lot of ads, but still, there's still a lot of ads out there. On top of that as well, they're still having some of the issues with the booth. I talked about it yesterday or a couple of days ago with the booth, that there's still a lot of things that certainly do need to be worked on with that, and some major inconsistencies, and sometimes they get a lot of facts wrong on that, and they just have issues with the graphics department. But I want to go back to Mike Joy. This is good to see him kind of take responsibility and accountability for something like this. I think it's a good thing he did do that. I think it's a big win for him, and nonetheless, pretty good to see that Mike Joy did clarify this mistake that he had and clarify an issue that he had on the broadcast. Good to see that from Mike Joy, in my honest opinion. And now we're going to jump on to the next story of today's episode, as we're talking about the Phoenix O'Reilly Auto Parts Series ratings from this past weekend. As it was reported by the CW count on X earlier today, that Phoenix and CW scored 1.559 million viewers for the NASCAR O'Reilly Auto Parts Series race at Phoenix Raceway, according to a score that is up 8% from this race in 2025. According to them as well, this had 1.379 million viewers, or 1.579 million as the peak viewership for the event, or 1.379 was a peak viewership for the event when it ended up happening. This is really good to see. I believe all four races for the O'Reilly Auto Parts Series started 2026 have been up over 1 million this year. COTA was over 1 million, not by much though. Daytona was like 1.6 or 1.7, and Atlanta had a pretty big number as well earlier in the year. The O'Reilly Auto Parts Series, like I mentioned, is having a little bit of growth to start the season. Generally, they've been up to start 2026, and what this shows is, one, you're having a consistent fan base that's tuning in on a week-by-week basis, and I think that's really important. But number two, it's also very important because, in my opinion, when it comes to racing product, the O'Reilly Auto Parts Series generally puts on a really good product and a really good show. And I think Phoenix, especially for the O'Reilly Series, well, sometimes the racing at moments for sure can have hit or miss moments. I think the racing at this track has been pretty good so far, and I think the racing in O'Reilly, well, at times I think it's been weak. It's been consistently one of those series that has a lot of success and a lot of people really like tuning into on a week-by-week basis. And I think the ratings for this week really reflect on that people are really interested in watching a series on a week-by-week basis. So I love seeing this. I'm glad to see the O'Reilly ratings continuing to go up for this series. I think that's a huge win for the sport. I think that's a huge win for the O'Reilly stuff. Good to see, nonetheless, and I'm very happy to see that the number is pretty good. 1.159 for a race at Phoenix. Good start to the year. Their numbers are up, and I think that's a big win for the series to start 2026, in my honest opinion. And now we're going to jump on to the next story of today's episode, as we're talking about higher horsepower. Now, after the NASCAR Cup Series race at Phoenix International Raceway, many drivers had some comments on the higher horsepower from the NASCAR Cup Series race at Phoenix they competed in. And a lot of drivers that were not only very happy about the higher horsepower, but they definitely could feel the difference. Among those individuals was none other than Denny Hamlin. After finishing 5th in the NASCAR Cup Series race at Phoenix, he spoke to Bob Pockers after the event and kind of spoke that there was definitely a big difference on the higher horsepower that happened at Phoenix International Raceway, and you definitely could feel it. He says that there is also potential possibly when we get to Darlington next week that there could be up to 4 seconds of tire fall off in the race. Hearing that we might get 4 seconds of fall off throughout an entire run, that is really, really huge. But I agree with Denny Hamlin about it. You definitely could tell, especially watching it. I wasn't in the car, but basically by watching it, you could definitely tell for sure that there definitely was increased horsepower in the car. And I think it really made the racing better. When it comes to Phoenix race, especially while, yes, there were a lot of wrecks and a lot of cautions, I think this was one of the best Phoenix races we've seen. And without question, by a mile, the best Phoenix race we have seen with the next-gen car. And I think it made the racing really, really good. And while I don't think it's perfect and there still is a long way to go, I think we're going in the right direction. And seeing races like we saw in Phoenix, I don't know, it gets me really excited for races coming up. I'm excited for Darlington next week. Darlington with the next-gen car has been very hit or miss, and it's a one-group track. But with having extra horsepower, it might make the racing really good at Darlington, even though I think it's been good at points. I think about other tracks like Bristol, for example. Could we see the crazy tire races? We saw a lot of tire issues at Bristol in the fall. Could we see that come up once again where you have to manage your stuff? I think that could be possible. I'm looking at Martinsville. Martinsville, I think, could be a really big banger. We haven't seen great races or good race a lot of times at Martinsville with the next gen. I think the racing could definitely be better. So I love the direction things are going with at this point when it comes to the racing, because I do want to see the racing product get a lot better, and I think we're headed toward a really good direction on that front. I love hearing the drivers be happy. And I think when you look at the fan base too, they're also very, very happy about this because they want to see the racing be really, really good. And I think the racing, like I've said, the start 2026 in the Cup Series across the board has been very, very good. And I think a lot of people are definitely very happy about what we've been seeing to start off the 2026 year. So good to see good to see people being happy about the racing. And I think it's also a big win with the increase in ratings that people are tuning in, enjoying it, and certainly being engaged with the racing. Good racing, in my opinion, is very important to keep people engaged overall, in my honest opinion. And now we're going to head on to the next story of today's episode as we're talking about the Phoenix Cup ratings from this past weekend. As it was reported by Adam Stern late last night, the FS1 got 2.841 million viewers for the NASCAR Cup Series race at Phoenix International Raceway. Well, Adam Stern did not put out exactly like certain things like percentages among other things. For when some people have reported, like Race Day report, and I think Jared kind of brought us up on his Twitter as well. The number is pretty much flat from 2025. I believe the event last year got 2.82 million, so it might have been an increase, but if it wasn't that big of an increase, but it pretty much was flat from 2025. That honestly is a really good number because last week at Circuit Americas, we saw a decrease in the ratings from I think like 3.5 down I think 200,000 viewers. And especially for cable, people are going to mention, well, we got 4 million viewers just a few years ago. I do want to remind people that while yes, we got 4 million 2 years ago, that race on main Fox, this race on FS1. You are going to have less people that are going to tune in FS1 races compared to main Fox events. I think it was also noted, though, this was the most watched programming that FS1 has had since, I believe, the ALCS back in 2025 last year. So that's kind of crazy that this is the most watched event for Fox they've had in almost 4 or 5 months at this point. But I think this is a really solid rating, all things considered. It's bigger than some of like the Amazon numbers. It's certainly a lot bigger than some of the races on USA. Hope we get more people tuning into the USA. But we've had a hit or miss start when it comes to the ratings to start 2026. I really hope we do get to see an increase in the ratings in the future. I think that's what a lot of people do want to see at this point is increase in the TV ratings. And I think flat, we're not in a bad direction. That's what we're expecting is we're going to have Kansas be on Fox. So we're going to have back-to-back race on Fox. That Kansas number is certainly going to go up. And I think Talladega could also go up even though we got a lot of the gridlock stuff going on with the next-gen car at this point. Nonetheless, I think it's a solid rating for this weekend. I think it's a pretty good one in my opinion and decent numbers for the Phoenix Cup Series race. Both IndyCar and Cup had some pretty good ratings from this past weekend in my opinion. And now we're going to head on to the next story of today's episode as we're talking about George Solano, a.k.a. Squirrel McNutt, as he announced and was reported by Colby Evans of ARCA Sarton Park that he reports that George Solano will make his ARCA East debut at Hickory Motor Speedway in a couple weeks from now, where he'll drive the number 0 car. A lot of people saw this and a lot of people rolled their eyes. If you don't know who George is, he is one of the lackeys and one of the people that's really closely aligned with Cletus Mafron. Reminder, about a week or so ago, it was announced that Cletus Mafron will be joining Richard Schultz Racing for a few select events in 2026. We'll drive at Rockingham in about 2 or 3 weeks from now. And then, of course, we'll try, if he gets approved and does well enough at Rockingham, he'll get the chance and opportunity to drive at Talladega later this year and then drive at Daytona later in this year as well. But he has to be approved from the race at Rockingham. George has been rumored to be racing in the ARCA East race, and he's racing at Hickory. Again, like I mentioned, a lot of people rolled their eyes at this move. But I got to be honest with you guys. I can't really roll my eyes at this one. I think George is absolutely doing it the right way, and I really have no issue and no problem with George doing this. Number one, he's racing at a short track like Hickory. If he does well enough in this race at Hickory, he will be approved for bigger tracks like Kansas, for instance, Talladega, among other things as well. I think this is the way that Cletus should have done it, and we'll talk about the approval process stuff again, because that's a big story currently at the moment, but I really have no issue with the way that George is doing this. I think that he is doing it the right way. He's racing in some of the lower stuff, because ARCA East isn't even the main ARCA series, for crying out loud. And I get that some people are questioning it and not liking the fact that someone like George is getting the opportunity. I don't even think he's competing in the fastest car. It might be Rhett Jones Racing, I'm not sure. But if George is approved from Dega, then Cletus and George will be racing as teammates in the event. I really hope both can do a good job, but they get to compete against each other. I think that's a very important thing at this point, is they both are competitive and can show some really good speed and some growth and development in the racing. But I think for George, it's a great opportunity. Obviously, is good friends with Cletus. I think it's a great opportunity for George. And once again, like I mentioned before, I really have no issue and certainly have no problem with George going this direction and running the ARCA East race. I think he may be competitive. Who knows? He might be faster. He's got people like Derek Nealon he's going up against, who is substituting for Carson Brown. We'll see how George ends up doing in a couple weeks from now at Hickory Motor Speedway. And now we're going to head on to the next story of today's episode, as we're talking about Dale Jr. Now, if you watched the NASCAR Rally Auto Parts Series race at Phoenix Raceway this past week, one of the last yells came out with around 25 to 30 laps to go in this race. There was contact between Anthony Alfredo and LeVar Scott. Anthony Alfredo would actually end up turning LeVar Scott, who basically wasn't, to be fair, in some instances giving enough room to Anthony Alfredo. But LeVar Scott didn't come down the track. Anthony just went straight up in the front of them and hit the outside of Anthony Alfredo, spinning him out. Despite that contact right there, Anthony Alfredo did have a really solid performance and finished inside the top 15 and did have a pretty good run. But if you go on social media, there was a post that was made about Anthony Alfredo by Mark Martin, where Mark Martin pretty much came on and praised Anthony Alfredo and called him a wheelman. And then Dale Jr. came on Monday and basically called out Anthony Alfredo and basically said that he just ran right into Anthony Alfredo and spun him out and took him out. I think that response from Dale Jr. caught a lot of people off guard, because LeVar Scott, number one, is not part of Junior Motorsports. He drove for Rev Racing last year in the ARCA Menards series. But I think that definitely caught a lot of people like myself off guard a little bit, because when you go on social media, a lot of times you don't really see Dale Jr. engaging in things like this and saying things like this. He's talked about the playoffs and stuff. We're going to talk about that later this week. He's talked about other things in the past. But normally you don't see Dale Jr. doing something like this. I have a little bit of suspicions, and I had a little bit of a theory. My theory is I think Dale Jr. might have been a little frustrated and upset that Anthony Alfredo got chosen over Justin Allgaier originally to drive at Phoenix Raceway. Justin Allgaier is a driver for Junior Motorsports, but Anthony Alfredo is a simulator driver. And I think Dale Jr. might have been a little frustrated and upset about it. That's the only thing I can think of at this point, because I really don't understand what made Dale Jr. tweet something like this. It's not like Dale Jr.'s car got wrecked. If Dale Jr.'s car got wrecked, like Sammy Smith's, for example, or I don't know, maybe Carson Quaffle had a good chance to win, it might have been frustrated about that too, because Carson Quaffle was likely going to win that race. That's probably one of the reasons I'm thinking he might have been frustrated too, is it looked like Carson Quaffle was going to win. But his car still ended up winning in the first place, that being Justin Allgaier. What's interesting is, I think Luke Clements, who works with Jeremy Clements, he basically kind of said that Sammy Smith made contact with Jeremy, almost putting him on the wall, and Dale really had nothing to say about that, and I kind of found it funny that Dale Jr. didn't even respond to something like that. But I get Dale Jr. being frustrated, because he probably wanted this guy to get behind the wheel, because he's good friends with Justin Allgaier, plus Justin Allgaier is one of his guys, and I think he would like to see Justin Allgaier get the chance and opportunity last week, and certainly Justin Allgaier is pretty good at a track like Phoenix, and I think he would have done a really solid and really, really good job behind the wheel. So I'm interested about it. I'm interested in Dale Jr. having any follow-up on it. I think it's certainly interesting that he made comments like that. I kind of wasn't expecting that, to be honest. I think it's certainly interesting. But again, like I said, it certainly did caught me off guard. And I think it caught a lot of people off guard with something like that. I was not expecting Dale Jr. to make a tweet on someone like Anthony Alfredo, especially since Anthony's part of the Chevrolet camp and is one of the reserve drivers for Hendrick Motorsports currently at this particular moment. And now we're going to jump on to the next story of today's episode as we're talking about Ross Chastain and Joey Logano. Now, if you watched the NASCAR Cup Series race at Phoenix International Raceway, you probably saw the contact between Ross Chastain and Joey Logano in the final stage of the race. Joey Logano did have one of the strongest cars in the event, but on a restart with around 70-75 laps to go, Joey Logano got in the back of Ross Chastain, ended up spinning him back across the racetrack and careened into Austin Cindric, destroying Cindric's left front car of his vehicle. And then also Anthony Alfredo got a ton of damage as well and fell out of the race because of the damage that he had on his vehicle. And we were wondering, because a lot of people were wondering if Joey and Ross were still mad at each other. Well, Ross actually got interviewed by Steven Aranda from CBS during media availabilities earlier this week, and Ross Chastain did confirm, then basically it was confirmed that Joey Logano actually called him on Monday after the incident, one, talk about what happened on the racetrack, and talked about and apologized to Ross for what happened on the racetrack. Ross also revealed that him and Joey do have a really good working relationship, and there's really no issues and no problems between both of them. I kind of am surprised to see that they both have a good working relationship, considering the fact they're two of the most volatile drivers on the racetrack. Two drivers that get a lot of people riled up from time to time, albeit Ross Chastain has calmed down a lot more over the years. But they've raced against each other. They've been on TV together, especially in the TV broadcast booth over the years when they did some stuff with the O'Reilly Auto Parts series a year or so ago. I think they worked together in the 2024 Indy's Frozen Custard 250 at Texas Race, one of the closest finishes between Ryan Sieg and Sam Mayer. And they both compete in different manufacturers, which is interesting. But when I looked at that incident, it was one of the dumbest things I have seen Joey Logano do. But I knew that Joey didn't do that intentionally. It was absolutely an accidental crash. But Joey Logano just didn't use his head in that situation. I thought the move on Logano there certainly was a little uncalled for and probably a move that was unnecessary to be that aggressive in that situation. You didn't need to be that aggressive, Joey, and you were that aggressive. And Joey, from what it sounded like, took a lot of accountability for the incident, which I appreciate that because, again, that was definitely one of the dumbest things I have seen Logano do in a long time. Because, yes, Joey Logano, he may not sometimes make the brightest moves out there and can sometimes be way over aggressive when he's at a racetrack. But you can't deny the guy certainly has a lot of talent, like 36 to 37 career Cup Series wins, one of the winningest drivers active currently at the moment. He's going to likely get the 40 wins in the next year or so, judging by the speed that Penske's had to start the year. It could potentially see Joey Logano get closer to that 40-win total. Could happen on a super speedway. Could happen on any type of track if they could bring the speed. I mean, they brought speed at the road courses, so who knows at this point. But I think for Ross is someone that doesn't let things really get to him a lot of times. I know he and Denny had a long beef really in 2022, and Ross and Larson had a little bit of beef, where it seems like Larson and Ross may be working together a lot better at this point in the Chevrolet camp, despite the fact the Chevrolets don't have the most pace and speed on a consistent basis. But I think the reason Ross also isn't upset is because the team knows they have a lot of speed currently at the moment. The Trackhouse cars have been one of the stronger Chevrolet teams. Hendrick's been a little bit off to start the year, but they've been one of the stronger Hendrick teams, which I do think plays a role in a factor why they're probably not upset and not frustrated about that incident there. I think if Ross had been running poorly and got taken out, I think he'd been more upset, but Ross was running pretty good in the race, which is why I don't think he was the most angry and upset about what happened on the racetrack at that point. So I'm glad to see they kind of talked about it. I wasn't sure if there was going to be any fallout from it. I certainly hope that they can move forward together and continue to have a good working relationship. So I don't want to see teams and drivers working against each other in the situations. You want to see teams moving in the right direction in these situations. So I'm glad to see things are going in the right direction on that front, and now they can focus forward on trying to move forward and work together on their track and put together good racing going forward as two drivers racing against each other at the time. And now we're going to jump on to the next story of today's episode as we're talking about Brad Keselowski and Denny Hamlin on NASCAR's approval process. Now, Brad Keselowski hosted the most recent Dale Jr. Down as Dale Jr. was basically going on vacation for spring break. We have some interesting quotes that did come out from Dale Jr. Down from Brad Keselowski we're going to talk about. But one of the big things that Brad Keselowski kind of talked about is NASCAR's approval process. Kind of spoke a little bit about the approval process, and same thing goes with Denny Hamlin from Actions Detrimental. Brad basically said that there are definitely some issues currently with NASCAR's approval process that certainly need to be worked on currently at the moment, but there's also some things about the approval process sounds like that might be a little bit right. Denny Hamlin had a more interesting approach when it came to the thing of the approval process. He feels like the NASCAR's approval process definitely needs a lot of work currently at the moment. He also talked about Cletus' Truck Series run where Cletus spun basically into the inside wall. Didn't crash anybody else in that situation, but spun into the inside wall. And he basically said there needs to be a lot more respect, and there certainly needs to be a lot more experience, it sounds like, when it comes to NASCAR's approval process. I agree with Denny Hamlin for the most part on this with the approval process, and when you hear a lot of drivers talk about this, a lot of the issues with the approval process is not the drivers themselves. I don't blame Cletus really at all for this situation. It's not Cletus' fault that he got a call from Richard Childress. I mean, Richard Childress was the one who called him, not Richard, but Ty Dillon and Austin Owen were the guys that call him. If you've got people from higher up organizations and O'Reilly calling you, are you really going to say no? You're probably not in that situation. So you're probably not going to say no at that particular point. But I think there needs to be a little more stricter when it comes to NASCAR approval process, or it needs to be a lot more consistent. And this is not just a situation with Cletus McFarland. This is an issue with other drivers. I mean, Natalie Decker, let's be real honest, she probably should not have been on the racetrack at all, to be honest, at Daytona. She hasn't really ran that much in the last couple years. Personal reasons why she hasn't really ran that much in recent years. But Natalie Decker, she should have not been approved. We've disapproved people like Mike Wallace, which, to be fair, there's a good reason why Mike Wallace wasn't approved, because Mike Wallace had not raced a race car in a very, very long time. Since 2015 on oval. Yes, he ran some road course race in 2020, but road courses are certainly way different than racing on ovals. So I think that they made a good decision on that front right there to not approve Mike Wallace, but there's been inconsistency. Meanwhile, I have other drivers like Luke Bowman, who has lots of experience, raced a lot of events, who can't even get approved to test a NASCAR Cup Series car for that matter, and he wasn't approved to do that. Meanwhile, I have other drivers not getting approved to do certain things and not getting the chance and opportunity to do certain things, like Brent Cruz. Brent Cruz, I know he's only 17, but Brent Cruz can't run at the bigger ovals. And yet you're telling me Cletus is going to get approved to run an event like this? That's the big thing. If Cletus had more experience, he, in my opinion, wouldn't question. Even have double the starts he has right now in stock cars, probably wouldn't question as much. Might be a little average from some people, but I wouldn't question it as much. But I think the approval process, there needs to be big work towards this. And I think NASCAR, one of the big things outside of the stage yells going away, one of the big things that NASCAR certainly does have to work towards is finding a way to change the approval process in the sport. It doesn't need to be crystal picture perfect by any stretch of the imagination, but it certainly needs to be big changes when it comes to NASCAR's approval process at this point, because there's a ton of inconsistency with it, and I certainly do think that there's some issues with it. And I think there's a lot that needs to be worked on with it to make the approval process better for a lot of people involved. I can't, again, really blame Cletus for the situation here, but I think there needs to be changes with the approval process, because certainly are some big issues, and certainly there are some big problems with NASCAR's current approval process, and I think there certainly are some big things that do need to be changed with it going forward in the future when it comes to NASCAR's current approval process and approving drivers in the sport currently at this particular moment and particular point and at this time. And now we're going ahead and jump on to the first of two major stories in today's episode, as we're talking about Alex Bowman. As it was announced earlier today, and we talked about on the channel earlier today in my story on my main YouTube video as well, that Alex Bowman is confirmed will not be racing this weekend at Las Vegas Motor Speedway and is out for the NASCAR Cup Series race at Las Vegas Motor Speedway. Justin Allgaier currently drives the number 7 car for Junior Motorsports in the NASCAR Auto Parts Series. Will make his second NASCAR Cup Series start as he ran for Junior Motorsports in the Daytona 500 earlier this year. Justin Allgaier will be the driver that will substitute for Alex Bowman in the race at Las Vegas Motor Speedway. We talked about this on the channel yesterday. Justin Allgaier had been the rumored driver likely behind the wheel of the number 48 car for this week, and we now know it's confirmed. The big reason why Alex Bowman is missing this weekend at Las Vegas Motor Speedway is Alex Bowman, unfortunately, has been out due to having vertigo. We basically, during the race at Circuit Americas, he got out of the car at lap 71 of the event, and my sider will be the driver that will come in and substitute for Alex Bowman in this race and in the event. It is unknown how long Alex Bowman is going to be out at this point. It's a week-by-week basis thing at this point for Alex Bowman. Anthony Alfredo drove the 48 car at Phoenix, struggled early in the race, got better as the race progressed and went on, and put together a decent performance until getting caught up in a crash and incident late in the race and late in the event. And now, because of that, Anthony's focus now being back in the O'Reilly Auto Parts Series full-time and trying to help the Young's Motorsports team and program to continue get that program up to speed and being the simulator driver for the team and program as well. But going first, before talking about Alex Bowman, let's talk about the driver substituting Justin Allgaier. Justin Allgaier, like I mentioned, has tentatively made a start in 2026 in the Daytona 500. Qualified very well for the 500, but unfortunately did get caught up in a crash and incident that he caused, and now is getting the opportunity to drive the 48. This will be the second time that Justin Allgaier has driven the number 48. He drove the 48 in substitution for Jimmy Johnson during the 2020 Brickyard 400 when Jimmy Johnson unfortunately got COVID-19 at that point, and he had to miss a race at Indianapolis, which is one of the reasons why Jimmy Johnson ended up missing the playoffs that year in 2020 because he missed an event like the Brickyard. So Justin working in the Hendrick and working with Junior Motorsports, a reminder, Rick Hendrick does have ownership in Junior Motorsports. I think that played a big role and certainly did play a pretty major role why Justin Allgaier was a driver that was certainly chosen to be the substitute driver for Alex Bowman. Also, Justin Allgaier has recent success at Vegas. He won the most recent spring race at Las Vegas Motor Speedway, and Allgaier has won here a couple times in the O'Reilly Auto Parts Series as well. So I think it's a great opportunity for Justin, and I wouldn't be surprised or shocked if Justin Allgaier is a driver next week at Darlington Raceway. Also, if Alex Bowman doesn't come back. The one thing about Alex Bowman, going to him real quick, number one, he's taken his health and safety as the number one thing, and I think that is 100% without doubt the most important thing for Alex Bowman currently at the moment. But I think at this particular point, it's becoming less and less likely Alex Bowman is going to make the chase. Alex Bowman is right now 77 points out, and he's likely going to go over 100 points back as drivers like Christopher Bell, Chase Brisco, and guys in that cutoff line are expected to move up a bit in the standings. If you're over 100 points back at this point, even after 5 races, it's going to be very difficult to grind that out because he'll have to gain about 5 or 6 points. And if Bowman misses a race at Darlington, it could be 120 or 130 points. The other big thing to look at with this as well is what happens next week at Darlington. He is supposed to run the NASCAR Rally Auto Parts Series race next weekend at Darlington too. The question is which Hendrick driver will come in and substitute because Roger Curve is going to drive the 32 car next week at Darlington. My big thing is it'd probably be Kyle Larson or William Byron who would end up being the drivers get behind the wheel of that car if they are the drivers chosen, which they can't withdraw the 88 car because the 88 car is going for the full-time, the owner's points this year. So I expect that a guy like Larson, Elliott, or Byron will be the drivers get in. But again, going back to Bowman, I'm worried for Bowman. Contract year. It's a tough year for Bowman. Been a frustrating situation for Alex. It's something that he has no control over. I mean, all the injuries really have not been his fault. Concussion in 2022 hit the wall. The car still had its big issues with the safety side of things. Then 2 years ago or 3 years ago, had the back injury racing in a sprint car accident and racing getting an accident. And then this year with the situation with vertigo, I don't know if the concussion played a role in it. Not sure at this point, but I'm concerned for Bowman's future. Hopefully Bowman can get healed up and get back to the racetrack as soon as possible because that's the most important thing. It's not racing, it's getting healed up and so he can live his life. I know he wants to get back to the racetrack soon, but again, the most important thing for Bowman is get healed up and get back to the racetrack as quickly and as soon as possible as well. And now we're going ahead and jump on to the final story of today's episode as we're talking about Kyle Busch. Now, I did a video covering the story on the channel yesterday or a couple days ago when you're watching this video. But Kyle Busch revealed some very gruesome and very unfortunate information that happened earlier in the year, right before the season officially began. It was revealed on the podcast that Samantha Busch does called Certified Overshare, and Kyle Busch was a guest for this week. He revealed days before the clash on January 30th, he was in, I believe, Braxton Busch's room, his son, helping Braxton Busch out, do some stuff basically in the house. And basically stepped on a stool, and the stool right under Kyle Busch ended up crashing and breaking into basically a ton of pieces, and Kyle Busch ended up falling to the ground. Apparently, Kyle Busch was then told by his son Braxton when he came back into the room, "Hey, Dad, you're gushing out blood. You're bleeding." And then Kyle Busch said to Samantha in this interview and said that we're going to the hospital to get this fixed up. Because reminder, this was 2 days before the clash was originally supposed to take place. What Kyle Busch revealed is he had to get 24 stitches on his leg and had to get that fixed. He actually didn't really mess up the muscle too much. The fat in the leg kind of got messed up, but the muscle in the leg did not really get messed up. So that was the good news. But here's the thing that's really interesting, why this is definitely really concerning. Obviously, contract year for Kyle Busch. This is a big year when it comes to contract stuff and whether Kyle Busch is going to return RC or not. But could this have been affecting his performance? I think it certainly could have been affecting his performance the start of 2026 year. And we could have had two drivers missing the Cookout Clash. Because like I mentioned earlier, while the clash ended up taking place on February 4th, which is a Wednesday after, this race was supposed to take place 3 days prior on February 1st. That is 2 days after this incident took place. If the clash happened on the original scheduled day, that Sunday, Kyle Busch would not have been able to race the Cookout Clash. So there definitely would have been a possibility that we could have seen a substitute driver come in, like a Jesse Love or Austin Hill. Because we saw that with Brad Keselowski, where Brad Keselowski had a substitute driver for the Cookout Clash, where Corey LaJoie was the driver who got behind the wheel of the event. Unfortunately, failed to make it by just a little bit because someone behind everything, maybe Austin or someone like that, got into the back of him, or A.J. Allmendinger ran in the back of Corey and forced Corey up the track, and Corey lost all his momentum in that situation. But for Kyle Busch, what a frustrating start to the year in a sense. That's something like this. We'll talk more about Kyle Busch because there was some radio chatter that came out too. But it's kind of crazy Kyle Busch got himself, or not really fully got himself injured, but injured himself before the start of 2026. And I'm glad to see that Kyle Busch is okay after this, because imagine if Kyle Busch had to miss the start of the season because of this. Imagine he had to miss the start of the year because of an injury like this. I mean, it's not the first time Kyle Busch has had an injury. He had to miss a lot of races in 2015 because of the crash during the 2026 Daytona 500. Or the 2015 Daytona 500 Speed Week weekend during the Florida Today Alert 300. He basically spun really hard into the inside wall and basically broke his leg and had to miss the first 11 races. Well, luckily for Kyle that year, he went on to win the championship in 2015 in the Cup Series despite missing a ton of races. And I do think when you look at that, it's kind of crazy to see that something like that, in fact, did end up happening. And I'm glad for Kyle he's okay, though. It seems like Kyle Busch is okay. He may have a limp, who knows at this point. Nonetheless, again, the most important thing is Kyle Busch is all right in his racing. Imagine if he had basically had to miss a bunch of races because he got an injury. I think that certainly would have been very unfortunate. It would have been a sucky situation. But for Kyle, glad to see he's okay, and glad to see he certainly is all right. After an incident like that, glad to see Kyle Busch was all right after the incident ended up happening. So, that's for today's long NASCAR news and motorsports news episode. I want to thank you guys for watching. Please subscribe to the channel. Notifications on so that when a video does go live on my channel. Follow me through Facebook and Instagram, and support me on Patreon as well. Let's go some more of that and comment your thoughts below on today's video. What are your thoughts about Kyle Busch injuring himself for the start of the season? Let me know your thoughts in the comments below. And what are your thoughts about Alex Bowman not racing this weekend at Las Vegas? Let me know your thoughts in the comments below. Tomorrow on the channel, we're going to have another NASCAR news video drop and talk about all the news I missed from Wednesday up to Thursday and other stuff we didn't talk about as well. Then on Friday or Saturday, we'll have reactions to the O'Reilly Auto Parts Series qualifying, maybe in the O'Reilly Auto Parts Series race, and the Cup Series race in Vegas. And then on Sunday, we'll have the starting lineup video for the Cup race in Vegas, and we'll have the race video as well. The Monday, we should have a NASCAR news video dropping. And then Tuesday, we'll have an intros video coming in Truck Series race picks for Darlington. Got a lot of content coming up. People like Haley Deegan, Shaman Gisberg, and Carl Edwards, Kurt Busch, Kyle Busch, Bo Wallace, Ross Chastain, Sheldon Creed, Sam Mayer, Frankie Muniz, Cletus Farm, Dodge Ram, Tony Stewart, Casey King, Gray Biffle, Will Brown, Connor Zilch, Junior Motorsports, Daniel Suarez, Red Bull, Eric Almirola, all the good stuff. Michael Jordan will talk about a lot of the stuff on the channel in the coming days and weeks as well. So anyways, like I said, I want to thank you guys for watching today's episode. I'll see you guys next time for more great awesome NASCAR content, other motorsports content on the channel like this. Take care, buddy.